This meeting of the Public Utility Commission of Texas will come to order to consider matters that have been duly posted with the Secretary of State for February 20th, 2026. Good morning, everyone. Before we get started, I'm going to let Sheila do a couple of logistical announcements that she wants to give to everybody.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. For people who are here in the room, if you're welcome to stand. We also have overflow rooms available next door at the PUC offices, the standard overflow rooms on the 7th floor, if anyone would like to go over there to have a seat or watch the meeting from the overflow room. And the other announcement I have is that the Commission granted oral argument for one of the dockets on the agenda. If anyone is here for oral argument but has not signed up for oral argument yet, I'm going to place this at the end of the table. If you will please come and sign up for oral argument. This helps us know how many parties there are, and also it'll help the court reporter have everyone's names. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Sheila. And yeah, if anyone wants to go to an overflow room, there's PUC employees that can direct you to where to go. So good morning, Commissioners. I think for this, I propose we take up the agenda in order this morning for the most part. We do have closed session and we have outside counsel that needs to speak to us. So I'd propose we do the consent agenda first and then briefly recess to go into closed session, address that issue, and then come back and go through the agenda in order. Does that work for everybody? Okay. Sheila, will you take us through the consent agenda, please?
Yes, there was one recusal memo that was filed by Commissioner Hjaltman. She's recused from items 3, 4, and 5. By individual ballot, the following items were placed on your consent agenda. Items 2, 3, 4, 5, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. No items from the Rules and Projects section of the agenda were placed on your consent agenda, and item 8 will not be taken out.
Thank you, Sheila. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as laid out by Sheila.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. And real quick, before we go to closed session, I did want to make one other announcement. For those of you who've been coming here for a while, you probably recognize our court reporter, Erica. She is having twins and is about to go out on leave, so we won't be seeing her for a while. And I just wanted to let her know how much we appreciate you. We're praying for you and your future family, that everyone's healthy, and congratulations and good luck. All right, having convened in a duly noticed open meeting, the Commission will now at 10:03 a.m. on February 20th, 2026, hold a closed session pursuant to Chapter 551 of the Government Code. It will consult with its attorney pursuant to Section 551.071 of the Code, deliberate personnel matters pursuant to Section 551.074 of the Code, and deliberate security matters pursuant to Section 551.076 of the Code. We'll be right back. The closed session is hereby concluded at 10:36 a.m. on February 20th, 2026, and the Commission will resume its public meeting. No action will be taken by the Commission regarding matters discussed in the closed session. All right, Sheila, that'll take us then to item number 1, public comment. Has anyone signed up for public comment?
No, sir, no one signed up for public comment.
All right, thank you. So then item number 6.
Oh, my apologies. I was not given that. Just a moment. Sir, did you sign up for oral argument or public comment? If you'll give me a moment, Chairman,
Sure.
Let me find out. Yes, this is a good opportunity for me to let anybody in the room know who's here for the Aqua case. When we take that item up is when I'll call people up for oral argument for the Aqua rate case.
Yeah, so we use public comment for anyone in attendance to discuss any items that are not on the agenda. Okay. Sheila, item number 6, will you lay out item 6, please?
Yes. Item 6 is docket number 57961, the complaint of John Hoetger against Wildwood Forest Apartments. Before you is the proposal for decision. No corrections or exceptions were filed, and Commissioner Hjaltman filed a memo in this docket.
Thank you, Sheila. Commissioner Hjaltman, would you like to lay out your memo?
Sure. I agree with the ALJ that this case should be dismissed, but given our approach in similar cases, I recommend we base the dismissal on other good cause shown pursuant to 16 TAC 22-181 D11 and clarify that the dismissal is also without prejudice.
Appreciate your memo. I agree. Commissioners, thoughts or questions?
Same here. I appreciate the acknowledgement that there appears to be some issues identified. And so this is a better resolution for the issue rather than a dismissal.
I agree with your memo as well.
We're having some IT problems, but
I can lay out a motion if you'd like.
that would be wonderful.
Sure.
Thank you.
So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the PFD with modifications consistent with Commissioner Hjaltman's memo.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. Sheila, next up is item number 7. Will you lay out item 7, please?
Yes, sir. Item 7 is docket number 58124, the application of Aqua Texas for the authority to change rates. Before you is an appeal of SOAH Order No. 5 filed by Commission staff. The Commission voted to grant oral argument, and Commissioner Hjaltman filed a memo in this docket.
Thank you, Sheila. So for order of operation, why don't we take up oral argument first? We can hear from folks that signed up and then ask them any questions we have. And then Commissioner, I'll let you lay out your memo after that. Does
That
that work?
sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Sheila, you want to call up the first group?
Yes, there are 5 parties that have signed up for oral argument. If the parties will go ahead and come up to the table, and I'll walk through how this will run.
You may want to say their names just if you have them.
Oh, well, I do. Yes, and I may need help with one pronunciation for one. Let's see. Just for the record, the folks that have signed up for oral argument include Warren Hackler, if I pronounce that correctly, Ann Coffin for Aqua Texas, Kevin, and I'm not sure how to pronounce the last name.
Me.
Is there a Kevin last name that starts with a T in the room?
Oh, he said he won't be speaking.
Okay. Thank you. Then Lauren Ice and Kelsey Dougherty for Commission staff. So if you all will give me just a moment. I believe, Chairman, 5 minutes for each.
Yeah, so we'll do 5 minutes. So just for everyone's understanding, we'll do 5 minutes. I'll show some latitude in that, but when you hear the buzzer go off, please try to come to a conclusion to your comments.
Right, and if it's helpful, I have this timer if you want to glance over and see how much time you have left. Before we start, under our procedural rules, the party that has the burden of proof in the proceeding has the opportunity to open and close if they choose within the 5 minutes. So would you like to, you're planning to open? Oh, I'm sorry.
I would have thought staff has the burden of proof since it's their motion and appeal.
We did talk about that. I think the rule is a little bit ambiguous. If staff would like to go first, that is fine. There we go. Staff would prefer to go first. Okay. In that case, staff, you may go first. And you can also, if you have remaining time, you're allowed to close as well. Is there anything else that we need to cover before we begin? All right. And let me check with Erica. All right. I will start the clock, and the first party then for oral argument is Commission staff. Oh, one more thing before you speak, just if you'll please state your name for the record.
If I could say something really quick, I'm going to try to reserve about 2 minutes.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners, Kelsey Dougherty for Commission staff. Thank you for considering staff's appeal of SOAH Order No. 5. Staff agrees with the memorandum filed by Commissioner Hjaltman yesterday. The questions before you today are simple yet carry significant weight for both Aqua's ratepayers and for all future water and sewer base rate cases. First, is the implementation of interim rates warranted? And second, does the Commission have the authority to set interim rates through a final order in this proceeding? Staff requests that the Commission find that the answers to both of these questions to be yes. Recognizing our time constraints and the fact that you have already considered the filings in the interchange, I offer 3 main points. First, a plain language reading of the statute and rule support the implementation of interim rates through a final order. Second, there is not long-standing or well-established commission precedent on this issue. And third, staff does not dispute that absent interim rates, a utility's current rates continue in effect until the end of the suspension period if one is imposed. Policy weighs in favor of implementing interim rates through a final order in this proceeding. If staff's appeal is denied, Aqua will charge its proposed rates to its over 100,000 customer connections beginning on March 9th. These rates will not be subject to a refund if they exceed the commission authorized rates. If the commission approves rates that are lower than Aqua's requested rates, then ratepayers will have paid rates for months that have not been found to be just and reasonable by the commission. However, if staff's appeal is granted, the interests of both Aqua and its ratepayers are protected. The interim rates that staff requests are the same rates that Aqua proposes in its second errata to the application. Therefore, if staff's appeal is granted, Aqua will have the authority to charge its proposed rates. And the only difference is that if the commission ultimately determines that Aqua's proposed rates are not supported by the utility's cost of service, then ratepayers will have the financial protection of a refund of the sums collected that were in excess of the rate finally ordered. Staff filed its direct testimony on Wednesday, and we indeed recommended reductions to Aqua's requested water and sewer revenue requirements. The interveners filed direct testimony last week, and like staff, they also recommended revenue requirements below Aqua's request or even below Aqua's test year revenue. If the commission makes a final rate determination following staff and the interveners' recommendations, then the commission-approved rates will be lower than Aqua's requested rates. Aqua has offered no reason why it adamantly opposes interim rates to a final order in this proceeding, other than it does not wish to true up its rates if the commission-approved rates differ from its proposed rates. However, because interim rates are supported by the Texas Water Code, Commission rule, and policy, staff respectfully requests that the Commission reverse SOAH Order No. 5 and grant staff's motion for interim rates to a final order in this proceeding. Thank you, and I'm available if you have any questions.
All right, there's a minute and a half remaining of your time. The next person who signed up to speak, well, let me just ask the parties, did y'all meet beforehand to decide the order of who's going to speak? No? All right. I'm going to go in order then the people signed up. So, Mr. Hackler, I believe you're next.
Yes, I'm a customer in Southwest Austin of Aqua Texas. I've got 4 primary points. One, we oppose any rate increase, or I oppose any rate increase in excess of inflation. Number 2, I support OPUC's rejecting OPUS expenses and encourage OPUC to limit attorneys' hourly rate that demonstrate the Commission's obligation to protect Texas consumers. I've always found it kind of absurd that the legislature requires consumers to buy the rope by which utilities hang higher rates on their consumers. So I'm suggesting that you let them buy sisal rope instead of a satin rope that's gold trimmed. Third point is Aqua Texas has demonstrated throughout this process they really don't know what their operational expenses are, or they are unwilling to share that required information in a format that can be easily understood. And finally, regarding the interim rates you were just speaking about, if there is one instituted, it must be refundable should PUC's final rule be on a lower rate. Again, I'm simply here as a consumer. Back in June of last year, I got this half-inch page package of information from Aqua Texas that made little sense to people that aren't water rate lawyers or mathematicians. And I spent a lot of time on it. I still can't quite figure out exactly what I might or might not be charged with these rate increases, but none of it looks good. I actually unintentionally signed up as intervener, so I managed to get all the emails that went through this process, and it's just mind-boggling to me how you guys get through this. So congratulations on the fine work you tend to do. The other thing I wanted to point out is, water is along with food, is a human necessity. And we're looking to you guys, the PUC, to make sure that we have that necessity at a rate that isn't going to break us, that isn't going to force us not to buy food, that isn't going to force people not to be able to do what they need to do to take care of their family. It is an absolute necessity. You don't live without water. And the way I look at it is Aqua Texas they're not producing anything. They're taking what Mother Nature has provided, for which we're paying the Edward Aquifer, apparently 3.185 cents per 1,000 gallons, and they're delivering it to us. So they've got the storage tanks, the pumps, chemicals, chlorine and fluoride that they're required to use under state law, obviously, the pipelines, repairs and maintenance. I get that. For that, they ought to get a reasonable rate of return. I'm not sure it should be based on gallons charges. Perhaps it should be based on their capital investment and a rate of return on that capital investment rather than on every gallon being charged, because we're already paying for that to the regional pass-through rate. That's my perspective on it. I'm not smart enough to understand all the intricacies of water rates and how all this stuff works, but it does, just to me, that's what common sense amounts to. And that's all I've got. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hackler. The next person that is signed up to speak is Ann Coffin on behalf of Aqua Texas.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ann Coffin on behalf of Aqua Texas. In 2013, in addition to establishing a 150-day limit on the rates suspension period.
And can you pull that closer to you, please? Thank you.
Sure. The legislature also added language to subsection E of the statute that establishes a mandatory approval date for proposed rates. The language provides that if the commission does not make a final determination on the proposed rates before the end of the rate suspension period, the proposed rate shall be considered approved. The term shall, unlike the use of the word may, signifies that rate approval is mandated by the statute if a final decision is not made by the end of the suspension period. The law requires that the statute be interpreted to give effect to the whole. It cannot be interpreted in isolated provisions. The only way to harmonize the interim rate language in subsection L with the rate approval mandate in E is to conclude that interim rates expire the earlier of the expiration of the suspension period or issuance of a final determination. Since 2023, the Commission and SOAH decisions have repeatedly interpreted the statute in this way, just as SOAH Order No. 5 does in this case. In those cases, the Commission recognized that the utilities' proposed rates took effect at the end of the suspension period through the issuance of a final decision. There is no reason to reach a different conclusion in this case. Aside from the plain language of the statute and giving it effect in its totality, please also consider that the merits offered in support of staff's underlying motion are vastly different than those argued on appeal. Appeals by their nature must be based on the underlying pleadings, not on changed merits arguments presented on appeal. It's also typical for water utility rate cases to take 1.5 years or more to reach a final decision. Rate certainty benefits all stakeholders. Extending interim rates beyond the rate suspension period requires utilities to navigate the challenges of securing funding for operations and investments based on unpredictable rate case outcomes over much longer periods of time. To date, the Commission's consistent interpretation of the statute has provided parties with a clear understanding of the structure and rules under which rate cases will be processed. This will no longer exist if different standards are applied from case to case. Finally, while some customers will see an increase under the proposed rates, others will see their rates decrease. On balance, even if the statute afforded the Commission discretion on this issue, which it doesn't, interim rates are not warranted in this case when all 377 water systems and 66 sewer systems that Aqua operates are considered. For additional clarity, I do want to point out that the Southeast TXAM and Carrizo systems, as you indicated, Commissioner Hjaltman, do have proposed rate increases. But for the Southeast, it is not a 400% increase. The rate comparison provided focused only on the current base rate charge. It did not take into consideration the volumetric rate that is also currently in place for those systems. In sum, we urge you to follow the law, to be consistent in your application of the law as you have done in prior cases, and to deny the appeal and uphold SOAH Order No. 5. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coffin. The next person that signed up to speak is Lauren Ice on behalf of Watershed Association, Hayes County, and the city of Woodcreek, I believe.
Thank you, Commissioners. Good morning. Lauren Ice for several interveners in this matter, and thank you for the opportunity to address you this morning. I think Ms. Dougherty and Commissioner Hjaltman's memo identified clearly what the two questions are that are before the Commission this morning. Does the Commission, and by extension SOAH, have the authority to set interim rates that remain in effect beyond the effective date and until a final decision on rates is made by this Commission? And does the Commission choose to establish interim rates in this matter here today? First, as Ms. Dougherty already outlined, the briefing, I think, and the memo pretty clearly explains the plain language of the statute of Chapter 13, Section 187, clearly establishes that the Commission has the authority to set rates and to have those rates be in effect until there is a final decision. I just want to offer one more point, though, on that matter regarding the plain language in Chapter 13. PUC Rule 24.37 also provides some context and specifically provides that interim rates are available to help protect customers from unreasonable economic hardship. So if we were not to allow interim rates after the effective date, that benefit would be significantly undermined. The ability of the Commission to provide that benefit to ratepayers would be significantly undermined. And so reading that rule and what the Commission's intent was with that rule, I think helps to show that we have to maintain the ability to provide interim rates as a tool to help protect ratepayers in situations just like this. I'd also like to address the argument that interim rates encourage parties who are opposed to rate increases to stretch out the proceedings. I think some of the arguments we just heard from Ms. Coffin are actually conflating the effective date with interim rates. The effective date is what sets the schedule for when the applicant can start collecting rates before, if that occurs before there is a final decision from this order. Interim rates are not, the effective date is automatic. Interim rates are not automatic, though. And so that, I think that's a conflation. There's no ability for us to change the schedule on effective dates, but there is the ability for us to make the rates that go into effect on the effective date interim rates instead. I think also, too, this argument gives ratepayers too much credit having the ability to control a schedule. When a case goes to SOAH, we have a judge. That judge is exercising discretion to control that docket. So even if ratepayers wanted to argue for a lengthier schedule, we'd have to make an argument for why that's necessary, and the judge would have to agree with us. As we sit here today, we have a schedule, we have an effective date. So there is nothing that we can do by setting interim rates to change that schedule without going back to our judge and asking our judge to change that schedule. I also want to address this point about rate certainty. the rates are never certain until the rates come back to this commission for a final order. So interim rates does not change that fact either. And the applicant, the utility, is always on notice that this body has the ability and the authority to set that final rate at the end of the hearing. So they should be taking that into account regardless of whether, parties are asking for interim rates. And this is what brings me to the second question, which is before you, whether or not the commission should set interim rates here. And my clients, interveners, supported staff's motion for interim rates, even for the applicant, but just so long as those interim rates would be in effect after the effective date and that they would stay in effect until there was a final order from this commission. They are not the default. Interim rates are not the default. We have special circumstances in this case, though, and it is a decision that's made on a case-by-case basis. And the circumstances in this case do support interim rates that are in effect until a final commission order. This case is unique because, as Aqua has said in their filings time and time again, it has been 20 years since their last comprehensive rate case. That is no one's fault but Aqua's. But now, as the gentleman to my left pointed out earlier, ratepayers are faced with this very large, very complicated application that includes entries that go back years and years and years. It includes a new rate structure that is consolidating all of the rates of the state. And just like the SIC case, in docket 55577, immediately preceding this, the ratepayers are presented with a disorganized application, and Aqua, which I think is demonstrated through the record here, is having trouble producing information responsive to staff, OPUC's, other interveners' requests for that information. This comes on the heels of those two SICs, and I will wrap up. Thank you. This comes on the heels of those two SICs. The prior SIC that Aqua had approved was done through settlement, and it did alert Aqua to the fact that they needed to organize their applications better to make for better review. The prior SIC immediately to this one, docket 55577, was denied because they did not organize their application. And it was interim rates in that case that saved the ratepayers from having to just be at a loss for that and to have that refunded. So I think those circumstances are what justifies interim rates in this case. And so we would support staff's motion in their appeal and request that those rates be, the interim rates be applied.
Thank you, Ms. Ice. Ms. Dougherty for Commission staff did reserve time, and so Ms. Dougherty, go ahead.
Thank you again, Commissioners. I have 5 main points I'd like to reiterate based on statements made by Ms. Coffin. Hopefully I can get through them all. The first one is, as previously stated by staff and is recognized in Commissioner Hjaltman's memorandum, the suspension periods in subsections D1 and E can be read in harmony with the interim rate statute and rule, and we believe that is exactly what staff is proposing. Second, I would like to reemphasize that there is no longstanding precedent on this issue. Third, staff stated reasoning for requesting the motion for interim rates was based on statements that Aqua made during the pre-hearing conference on December 3rd. Staff takes its role in representing the public interest seriously, and we believed then and believe now that interim rates are appropriate in this proceeding. My fourth point regarding the revenue certainty discussion, staff recognizes that revenue certainty is important so far as it allows a utility to earn a fair return on the utility's invested capital. However, staff also believes that revenue stability at a level above just and reasonable rates does not serve the public. Lastly, staff would like to reemphasize that the requested increase in revenue requirement that Aqua is proposing is a substantial increase, and staff respectfully requests that the Commission implement interim rates through a final order. Thank you.
That concludes oral argument.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone who appeared today to give testimony. Commissioners, questions for anyone?
I only had one. Ms. Coffin, can you repeat? You said you gave I think a generalized or average about how long a rate case lasts for an investor-owned utility with the Commission. And I believe, is it correct that you said 1.5 years?
At least, usually it's typically at least 1.5 years or longer. In some instances, it has lasted several years.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Commissioner Hjaltman, would you like to lay out your memo?
Sure. I lay out my memo, but also kind of respond to some of the statements made. First of all, we are not deciding anything in regards to the rates being put into place. That's not what we're doing here right now. The commission has never ruled on this issue directly. We've had many cases, but they never touched on these specific items. And third, in regards to statements of law, any lawyer will tell you that you cannot read the statute in isolation. You have to read all sections, and that includes Section L, which gives us the ability to at any time set these rates, and they will continue through the suspension period in total. So I can go through, I do lay out some legislative intent that we did some research on in my brief as well, and I can go through that further, but those are my quick summaries of where I am. I was on the fence, but as I've gone through and kept going, I think I'm pretty firm on where I'm standing right now.
Commissioner Johnson, do you have thoughts on this as well?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I don't know if I have any more questions. I first want to thank everyone that spoke today for oral arguments. It was very appreciative. And I acknowledge that rate cases are not easy. As someone, this is my first one really to substantially work on here. So I appreciate the effort and the time involved in doing this when, especially as a rate payer, you have your other jobs and your other things and your other obligations. I really do appreciate your memo, Commissioner Hjaltman. I think you made some really good points. I thought the legislative history that you included in the memo was enlightening. And I think where I'm struggling on this item is that it appears to me that the legislature was considering a lot of important policy items when they originally passed the statute 13187 and then amended it subsequently. Some of those, obviously, I think many have pointed out today during oral argument include things like the public interest. I think we also can see that the legislature was worried about economic certainty, regulatory certainty. They were worried about transparency. And it does seem, when read together, that the statute does encourage rate cases to move quickly and expeditiously through the process. But I'm having a hard time understanding, and I don't know if, Chairman, you're wanting to put out a vote today or not, but I can tell you right now I'm having a hard time reconciling all of those different policy considerations that it appears that the legislature considered when passing and amending this statute with a case or cases that potentially last for a year and a half or longer when the legislature clearly seems to articulate a suspension for only 150 days. I think that's a little bit where I'm grappling with, where it appears as though the law supports that the proposed effective or the proposed considered approved rates are not subject to a true up, while interim rates are subject to a true up. And there seems to be an implication for that. But if the suspension period only is 150 days, and if one reading of the statute only allows an interim rate to exist for those 150 days, I'm just struggling a little bit with coinciding all of those considerations.
Yeah, I'll say my hope was to take a vote on this today because the suspension period ends on the 9th and we don't have another open meeting till the 12th. So I was hoping we could get through this today. Sheila, I don't know if we don't, kind of what then happens on the 9th. So I think that would be an open question. So I think it's probably in everyone's best interest if we can come to a conclusion today, if possible.
Okay.
I appreciate the folks showing up for oral argument. And, you know, it's a real challenge, I think, for ratepayers and for consumers. And oftentimes what's really in the best interest in making sure that we have a dependable and reliable water supply for people across Texas is that we have the incentives for investor-owned utilities to make the investment and to do it in such a way that is not only providing for the needs of today, but is also looking ahead for what we need for the future. And I think the legislature has put some things in place that, quite frankly, are going to enable us to do that. One being the system improvement charge, which enables the utilities to go out and recover their their capital, and then to come back during a rate case and actually, if the term is, you know, get the data and validate the assumptions that were made. there are a number of things that have been put in place, and the timeline being one of the items that's encouraging us to do this as rapidly as we can. And, one of the things I think we've shared, particularly with Aqua before, is that the way that you help us to do that is that you put together your data and your information as you move forward in the process, and that you take the accountability of doing that so that when we, as regulators, go in and look at it, it's something that, we could take, any item that is in a humongous spreadsheet and basically be able to, if you will, validate that information. So in some regards, in this process been set up to the extent that you can help us to help you, speeds up the process, and also make sure that the data that's presented is validated, which protects the consumer. Because I think we all want the same thing. We want a cost that is reasonable. We want to make sure that we're investing in the future, and we want to make sure that our investor-owned utilities have the return that they need so that they in turn can be successful. But at the end of the day, the investor-owned utilities exist because of the customer. And one of the things that I guess I'm really kind of grounded in, struggling with, or whatever, is this whole concept of potentially not being able to true up the cost because of some deadline or some suspension period that has passed. And I've met with a lot of the leadership from the water companies, and honestly, from the meetings that we've had, my thought is that they would embrace that concept because it's at the very, to me, it's at the very center of what our process is. And so, to have something presented that because of an end of a suspension period doesn't allow you to go up and true up after you've had the chance to review the data and the information is just not consistent with how we've done it in the past, and I think in the way that we would want it to do it in the future. And again, I think in my heart, if you would talk to the leadership of water companies, they exist in order to provide for the consumer. And I know you're making this case, but I just would feel like that they would feel the same way. So I guess for me, I would lean towards granting the appeal, and I know that the issue right now is at SOAH, and so they would most likely be the ones that would determine the interim rates going forward. But I honestly think this is what's in the best interest long-term of communities across Texas, and I honestly believe that it's also in the best interest of our investor-owned utilities.
I just wanted to I appreciate that, Commissioner Jackson. One point that I was going to make is that I do think in the ALJ's order, I understand that in staff's filing originally, they requested interim rates and then subsequently also requested how long those interim rates should continue for. I thought I have a little bit of a heartburn with an order that opines on the time frame for allowing interim rates when the denial was issued for the interim rates. I see setting interim rates as a threshold question before there is any opining on how long those interim rates would last. So I just thought I'd underscore that and clarify that for this discussion.
Good discussion. Commissioner Hjaltman, like we discussed this a lot, and I really appreciate your memo. I think one thing that is clear is that potentially discussing this at the next legislative session and how to deal with it would be good. Something I would encourage staff to consider putting in our agency report to kind of tee up for the legislature. I'm persuaded by your memo. I appreciate the legal analysis and your comments back to Aqua on the issues that they raised, and so I'm fully supportive of granting the appeal and supporting your memo.
I agree. I think statute can always be a little clearer and a little more cleaned up and we learn as we go, and the legislature writes these kind of in chunks. As we know, this was in this 69th session and then not again until the 83rd, and that's a lot of time. That's totally different members, completely different world from those years. So I think it's something we definitely should put on our list, and the water companies can put on their list to work on as well. So with that, I would move that we grant staff's appeal and overturn SOAH Order Number 5, consistent with my memo and our discussion on the dais.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion prevails. Again, thank you to everyone who came. All right, Sheila, that will take us then to item number 14. Will you lay out item 14, please?
Yes, Commissioner. Sorry, Chairman. I was distracted. I'm looking over at our court reporter, Erica, to see if she needs a break before we go into this item. You're okay. All right. Item 14 is docket number 57568, the application of El Paso Electric Company for authority to change rates. Before you is a SOAH proposal for decision. The parties filed exceptions and corrections. The SOAH ALJ has filed a letter making one change to the proposal for decision to add an ordering paragraph. And the PFD is before you now.
Thank you, Sheila. So commissioners, consistent with how the commission has done these fully litigated rate cases in the past, I think what I'll do, I have 9 or 10 issues where I would kind of deviate from the PFD. Everywhere else I was good with and agreed with the PFD. Why don't I run through those and we can discuss each one, and then after I conclude, if there are other issues that you'd like to bring up, we can do it at that point. Does that work for everybody?
Sounds good.
Okay. First off, I want to thank our advising staff that worked on this. For those of us that this is the first fully litigated rate case, the briefing documents that were prepared, and I know I went and talked to John specifically, thank you. It really helped us get through a very meaty docket, and really I think brought to light a lot of the really big policy issues and made this something that we could come to a really good determination on. So I appreciate all staff, but John, especially the documents you prepared. Thank you for that. All right, commissioners. So first I would go to the section on expenses and discuss transmission expense and revenues under FERC approved tariff. That would be section 4A2. So here the ALJ agreed with the City of El Paso's recommendation to adjust the test year transmission revenue credit upward by $10.7 million. I would reject that recommendation. This is not a known and measurable change from that year. Future transmission rates for FERC can be known, but the revenues are not known, and for that reason, I would reject this recommendation. Thoughts?
Are you just rejecting outright and no?
Yes.
I agree as well. The revenue credit's not a known and measurable change from the test year.
I'm in agreement.
Same here.
Okay. Next, still under expenses, I'd address labor-related expenses, directors and officers liability insurance. That's section 4F. The ALJs recommended that shareholders and ratepayers split the cost of directors and officers liability insurance costs 50-50 as proposed by the City of El Paso. I'd reject that recommendation and allow full recovery of the insurance premiums. The commission has previously found that liability insurance for directors and officers is a reasonable and necessary operating expense.
I'm in agreement.
Same here.
I'm in agreement as well.
Next, still under labor-related expenses, I'd address Board of Directors fees. That's section 4G. The ALJs recommended here that shareholders and ratepayers, again, split the Board Directors fees 50-50. I'd reject that recommendation and allow full recovery of the board's compensation.
I'm in agreement.
Agreement.
I agree.
Next, I would move to the section addressing functionalization and cost allocation, jurisdictional allocation for the Newman Unit 6. That's section 6A2. Here, the ALJs rejected EPE's request to treat Newman Unit 6 as a Texas-only resource. I agree with the analysis of the ALJ. This is a system resource that serves both Texas and New Mexico. I would modify the PFD by adding a finding noting that EPE's off-system sales margins are not jurisdictionally allocated to Texas. Newman's Unit 6 off-system sales margins are being used in a way that benefits both New Mexico and Texas customers.
Good point. I'm in agreement.
Yeah, agreement as well.
I'm in agreement as well.
All right, next, I'd address revenue distribution and rate design, specifically rate moderation, gradualism. That is section 7A. Here, the ALJs recommended that rate moderation is appropriate for the residential class. I'd reject this recommendation. I don't believe that rate moderation is appropriate in this case. I agree with staff, with commission staff, that rate moderation will result in rates that are not just and reasonable and conflicts with commission rules.
I'm in agreement.
Same here.
I agree, rate moderation is not appropriate in this case.
Next is revenue distribution and rate design. I would go to the rate design and tariff changes, residential customer charge, that's section 7D1A. The ALJs recommend retaining EP's current residential service customer charge. I would reject that recommendation and approve EP's proposed residential customer charge for the reasons that were provided by commission staff. Commission staff recommended that the proposed charge is cost-based and reasonable.
I'm in agreement.
Same here.
In agreement?
Next, again on rate design and tariff changes, I'll briefly address residential peak and off-peak months. That is section 7D1B. The PFD states that EPs propose to maintain existing peak and off-peak months. EP disagrees with that characterization. I'd modify the PFD to clarify EP's position. EP actually did propose to change the summer period definition.
I'm in agreement.
I'm in agreement.
Same.
All right, number 8, still on rate design and tariff changes, I'd address distributed generation tariff. The LJ here rejected EP's proposal for a new DG rate, and that included NCP demand charge. I would reject that recommendation and approve EP's proposed DG tariff for the reasons provided by commission staff. I agree with the extensive analysis by staff and appreciate staff's efforts on this, that EP's existing minimum bill design is inadequate for cost recovery. For this, though, I would grandfather in existing customers and make this just perspective.
Okay. I'm in agreement with that.
I'm in agreement.
I'm in agreement.
All right, number 9, still on rate design and tariff changes. I'd address rate 41 tariff, that is section 7D6. The ALJs recommend that rate 41 continue to receive preferential pricing, but the specific level of the discount should be determined by the commission. I'd reject that recommendation. Rate 41 should be moved to full cost of service without discount. The statute and the evidentiary record do not support determination of the appropriate amount of the discount or the appropriate methodology for allocating that discount.
I'm in agreement. Rate 41 should be cost-based.
Yes.
I'm in agreement.
And then finally, on reasonableness and recovery of rate case expenses, specifically amounts sought by the city of El Paso, that is section 9B. The ALJ found that the city's requested rate case expenses are fully recoverable. I'd modify the PFD to disallow city rate case expenses related to a FERC proceeding. Reimbursement under PURA does not apply to FERC proceedings.
I'm in agreement.
Yes.
I'm in agreement as well.
Okay, so that went through my list. Like I said, I agreed with the rest of the PFD. I'm happy to hear any thoughts or areas where you may want modifications as well.
Your list aligned with my list.
Thank you for going through those, Mr. Chairman. I agree with what you've identified. And thank you, staff and OPDM, for all the work.
Agreed here as well.
Okay, yeah, again, fully litigated rate cases, we don't see them very often. We get, negotiated stipulations most of the time. And so appreciate all the work that went into this to get us to this kind of final resolution. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the PFD in part and reject in part, consistent with our discussion, and to delegate authority to the Office of Policy and Docket Management to request a number run, and also delegate to OPDM to draft an order with modifications consistent with the commission's decision.
So moved.
So moved. Go ahead.
So moved.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion prevails. All right, Sheila, I think that concludes the contested case portion of our docket. So Now I'll look to Erica. Would you like to take a 15 minutes? 10 minutes? All right. So we're going to take a short break. We'll be back at, let's call it 11:35. We'll take a short recess. All right, everybody, we are going to reconvene our open meeting at 11:36 a.m. Move on to the rules and projects portion of the agenda. So first up is item number 23, that is project number 55999, reports of the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. And I think we have ERCOT and the Independent Market Monitor here to give presentations. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Keith Collins with ERCOT. And I'll go through our presentation. Happy to answer questions as I go along. I know you, in the materials was a presentation and a memo from myself. Just outline that quickly. In our memo, we identified 11 follow-up items that we're presently working on through the stakeholder process. We have our real-time co-optimization plus batteries task force that has organized that material, and we look forward to bringing that to the technical advisory committee for assignments to the remainder of the stakeholders to address these items. We do appreciate the input from stakeholders and from commission staff, particularly Harika Basaran, providing input in that process. And then in my presentation, I covered a follow-up from an item that I discussed late last year in terms of the performance of the real-time co-optimization plus batteries implementation, which happened at the beginning of December. We have been able to update some information on various elements of that implementation, and I'll cover some of those in my presentation today. So thinking about the presentation, there's a couple key items that we put in there for slides for your consideration. The first one has to do with, we received the question, is real-time co-optimization working, and how can we tell? And one way to tell is if we see changes and switching from schedules awarded in the day-ahead market, which was co-optimized originally, but the new real-time co-optimization, what changes are we seeing? And we are seeing significant changes in terms of awards on resources. And we do have a slide 3, that shows that. And what's interesting is, particularly when you look at the regulation service, over 60% of the regulation that's awarded is actually switched once it comes to real time. It's a little bit less for some of the other resources, and we also have a slide 4, that shows the hourly profile of the different products and how there is some variation depending on the hours for regulation down and regulation up, particularly during the ramping periods. But for the most part, we're seeing a consistent change in the optimization that's occurring in real time. So we consider that a sign of success, that it is actually making trade-offs economically that was not occurring before. Another item that has come up is whether or not the participation by resource type would shift. And ultimately what we saw, we did an evaluation both pre-RTC implementation and post-RTC implementation. And what we found was that actually in some services, for instance, regulation and RRS, that the amount of procured capacity by resource type did not change very much, both pre and post RTC implementation. We're seeing about the same volume of awarded capacity. The difference is with our ECRS service that we are actually seeing a significant increase in storage resources providing ECRS, and we've seen a slight downward shift in terms of the amount of storage resources providing non-spin. I will note, though, that the volume of non-spin, and some of the IMM points out, is the volume of non-spin is a little bit higher than it used to be, so that changes a function of the resource mix and the fact that we're also procuring more resources overall. And so we do have a slide that highlighted that. Other items that we wanted to highlight were the use of ancillary service only awards. Ancillary service only awards is a product that existed with the RTCB. It is a financial only product, and we do see participants utilizing this product. But at this point, it still seems to be of a limited volume and limited awards. But it is something that is that we would anticipate more use as experience with the product and the pricing occurs over time. Another area of concern was with regards to stranded ancillary services. This is where you can have ancillary services awarded behind constraints, and that ancillary service becomes undeliverable and can become a problem. What we noted was that the operators, so before launch, that we noted the operators have a manual way to address this problem. What we found was operators on 3 instances on a total of 5 resources took advantage of that. One of the issues was a result of telemetry. The other 2 were a result of awards either being helping or hurting the congestion. We see that as a result, this is not a significant issue. It's something that we will continue to track, but the data does not show that this is a significant problem that warrants further action, at least at this time. And then just a couple final points to make is when we looked at proxy awards, this was something that our IMM had noted as something to be mindful of. We have been mindful of it. We have followed the number of awards, and the number of awards that we saw were 0.2% of ECRS and 0.4% of total awards of non-spend, which in our view is pretty limited, and when they have been accepted, the price has been at the $15 area. So that is not something we would consider problematic at this time. And so really when we start thinking about next steps for the RTCB project is to really focus on these further evaluations that were identified, and to focus on any particular cleanup items. We still have some stabilization going on over the coming weeks and months here, but we do anticipate that winding down over the next couple months. So overall, we see this as a success, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have on the presentation, and happy to wait for the IMM as well. Thanks.
Yeah, commissioners, why don't we let the IMM do their presentation, then we can ask them all questions.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, commissioners. Appreciate the time to chat today. I'm Jeff McDonald, director of IMM. I have with me Andrew Reimers, who's a deputy director on the IMM team as well. So we're going to split this up a little bit. And I appreciate the material that Keith went over too. I sort of counted on him going first. That allowed us to not cover some of those matters. So we're going to focus our presentation on the 3 primary changes or larger fundamental changes that RTC embodied. One of them was changes to the day-ahead ancillary service market, where you have shortage pricing as opposed to vertical demand curves and also virtual bids. The second one is the actual efficiency from the co-optimization itself, being able to trade off in real time between, make an economic trade-off between reserves and energy. And the last one has to do with differences with how energy storage resources are treated and how some of the other changes I just mentioned would affect their behavior. So we're going to focus on those 3 aspects. You'll notice in our slides we included a lot of empirical analysis. We're happy to talk about any of that with you if you like, but we'll just focus on those 3. And I'll go ahead and start off with the day-ahead ancillary service changes. So as I noted, there are 2 fundamental changes for day-ahead ancillary services. One was a shift from a vertical demand curve to a shortage pricing curve, which allows that day-ahead market to do somewhat of a trade-off, again, where the marginal reliability value of going shorter or longer on reserve products is reflected in the price, rather than on a vertical demand curve, which doesn't embody that flexibility. So that was a good change. We don't have a measure to reflect the benefit of that change so far. I think once we get further into RTC, we may have a measure for that. The other benefit or big change was the addition of virtual bids in the day-ahead ancillary services. And that's a pretty large fundamental change. We, and Keith, in his slide deck, and I think Keith's and our measure are fairly complementary to each other. In Keith's slide deck, he notes the amount of virtual bids that were cleared versus the amount of virtual bids uncleared on a large volume basis. And that gives you a good indication of the utilization and the potential impact on price that virtual bids are having in the day-ahead market. We chose to look at the virtual bid contribution to liquidity around the clearing price. So we were very interested in how much are these virtual bids helping the price move smoothly around to find its clearing point and its equilibrium point. That liquidity is and ease or smoothness of price movement is a good feature to have in any market so that your price isn't jumping around with respect to small changes in procurement volume. So what we found with that liquidity measure was there was somewhat of a positive increase in liquidity around the clearing price, but it wasn't as large as I would have expected. And I think there's at least one large reason, if not two, for that. One of them is that's a brand new financial product in the day-ahead market, and companies who participate in the ERCOT market may not have fully appreciated how to incorporate that into their commercialization. So I would expect to see over time, as companies get more comfortable with virtual bids in the ancillary services market, that you'll see more liquidity coming in there. And so it's not harmful in any way. It can only have a positive benefit. And so I think that's something that we're looking forward to in the future. We would also like to see those bids help converge day-ahead and real-time price. Again, we're going to need to go through more time, see how this behaves across seasons. And unfortunately, because there was not a real-time ancillary service market pre-RTC, we won't have anything to benchmark it against. We'll just have to, track it going forward. So that's the virtual bid aspect in the day-ahead market, and I'll kick it over to Andrew Reimers to cover the other two aspects.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. I think I can still, yeah. Me? Okay. Is this, this one might not be on. Yeah, okay. Thanks a lot for that, Jeff. Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Reimers, Deputy Director at the ERCOT IMM. I'm going to follow up on what Jeff was saying, focusing on two issues in particular. So we have some additional analysis kind of related to some of the stuff Keith presented as far as like efficiency gains from real-time co-optimization. So I'll start there. And then I want to get into some of how batteries are being modeled in SCED now that we have real-time co-optimization and the implications that seems to have had for how batteries are participating in the market and how that's affecting the clearing prices in the market. So as for the efficiency gains in the market, Keith presented a version of how you might get your hands on this, which is basically the difference between day-ahead awards and real-time awards. So now there can be a lot of adjusting of ancillary service positions between day-ahead and real-time. We wanted to take a slightly different approach to that, considering in the previous market design, if you were awarded an ancillary service in the day-ahead, that award was then a physically binding award in real time for the entirety of an operating hour. In real time now, SCED can adjust the positions that different resources have for ancillary services throughout an operating hour. And that's particularly relevant in the morning or in the evening during sunset or sunrise and sunset, where as a lot of solar enters the market, you have a lot of shifting positions as far as which resources are carrying ancillary services and which ones are generating energy and things like that. What we found, we tried looking at basically the 30-minute window that we defined as sunrise and sunset and tried to pick out the biggest change in ancillary services across that window. And if we look at that for the entirety of go live, basically, we see that something like 5 to 10% of ancillary service positions change on average during sunrise and sunset. So for some context, that's a pretty big percentage. That might be several hundred megawatts moving around. And we don't have a good estimate on how that's impacting the cost just yet, but that's a big enough volume that it should have a substantive improvement in terms of how prices are clearing and the kind of efficiency we're getting from RTC. So that was one of the main kind of rationales for implementing RTC in the first place, and that seems to be working as expected. The other kind of big change with RTC mechanically is that the state of charge of batteries is now reflected in the real-time market explicitly. And so for batteries to be awarded ancillary services in real time, their state of charge has to be sufficient to be able to carry that award in real time. That imposition in SCED has implications both for how the batteries are inclined to participate in the day-ahead market, and then also it has implications for price formation in real time. As for the day-ahead market, we all who are following this probably know that batteries get a lot of their revenue from the ancillary service market. They're a huge percentage of the overall ancillary service provision in ERCOT. And again, until recently, for batteries to do that, they had to sell those ancillary services in the day ahead. Now that they can provide them, sell them directly in real time, they have a little less of an incentive to sell them in the day ahead. Selling them in the day ahead now implies some amount of imbalance risk, as in if they sell ancillary services in the day ahead, and then for whatever reason in real time, maybe their state of charge has changed compared to what they thought it would be, maybe they have to buy those positions back at a higher price. That just implies a little more risk for selling ancillary services in the day ahead than there used to be for batteries. And so when we look at this, we see that batteries have started offering ancillary services into the day ahead at a little more of a premium than they had before. We don't really see this as an issue. It's sort of something that we predicted. And as to Jeff's point earlier, we don't really see this contributing to a liquidity problem because the introduction of virtual AS is still in the mix so that those prices are clearing where they should and everything like that in the day ahead, even though there's less competitive bidding from batteries in the day ahead. So that's the day ahead story for batteries. The real-time story is simply the extent to which this state of charge constraint is influencing clearing prices. We've noted a few different ways this seems to be manifesting itself, but the main thing that we've kind of had our eye on is the way non-spin prices have been clearing. So non-spin has a 4-hour duration requirement, which is a lot higher than any of the other ancillary services. And you can see that reflected in the relative prices of the different ancillary services. So you have non-spin clearing 4 times higher than ECRS and 8 times higher than RRS. That's more or less a clean break based on the difference in duration constraints. This is also being influenced by the demand curve for non-spin, which for a variety of reasons extends out all the way to the end of the AORDC, which is a lot greater than the actual kind of non-spin procurement volume. All of this is factoring together such that non-spin prices are coming out higher than we would argue they probably should be. And so that's something we've been keeping an eye on. But like everyone has said, this is sort of a, marginal tweak that we would like to see fixed on the design of RTC, but no major issues or anything like that that we've noticed so far.
Commissioners, questions?
One quick question, I guess, in regards, like, this is great data that we're getting. Will it be useful in when we're looking futuristically at what we want to incentivize for future build out?
This is Jeff McDonald. Are you referring to sort of the fork in the road for design to get to resource adequacy?
Not necessarily resource adequacy, but just we can see now where resources are necessarily going as far as who's bidding in and who's getting those bids for certain ancillary services. Do y'all think it would be helpful for that going forward to look at that?
I think it'll be very insightful now that we've got there is now a full complement of ancillary service markets, and real-time reserves are obviously a big deal for ERCOT operations. A big issue for us, as we've noted, we think that shortage pricing on reserves is really a fundamental way to go for a market. And so I think and unfortunately things change season to season, so we're going to need to wait a little while and collect more data. But I do think that the RTC world is going to give us a much richer set of information to build our expectations going forward.
Yeah, Yeah, and I'd say that's my big takeaway from this is we'll be able to collect a lot of data, but I would caution against making too many judgments or conclusions this early. We need to kind of see how this plays out as it matures and kind of analyze it at that point. I think as it's more mature and where we need to make tweaks, we can. All right. Appreciate y'all's time. Thank you for the update. All right, that'll bring us to item number 25. That is project number 59142, review of ERCOT's interconnection process for large loads. Jeff is here. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jeff Billow with ERCOT. So we filed a short presentation for our update on transitioning the large load interconnection process to a batch study process. Slide 2 is essentially where we have been with collecting feedback from stakeholders, and slide 3 is where we're going with the revision request. So I'll start with slide 2. Last time I was here, I provided some insights that we had received from stakeholders in terms of feedback from the individual interviews that we had conducted through the month of January, as well as some initial feedback that we received from the February 3rd workshop. Since that time, we have also been gathering written comments from stakeholders, and we sent out a survey and had some additional insights that I wanted to share. So some of the insights are consistent with what I have previously communicated to you, but some additional insights I thought were interesting. So from the survey, one thing that I found interesting is that there was not a single question. I think there were 30-something questions in that survey. There was not a single question where we received unanimous agreement in the survey response. And I think that is telling in and of itself, because that tells us that not everyone do we expect is going to agree with everything in this process, and we have to understand that there can be compromises that we have to make along the way. Another interesting takeaway was we had asked, we had offered different batch study cadences and kind of different trade-offs with that, and 89% of the survey respondents favored a 6-month batch study cadence. And so that was pretty insightful for us. There was a lot of feedback that we've gotten on batch 0, what should be our eligibility criteria for loads to get into that. And I would say there's some disagreement on that, but there was some agreement on operational readiness, and strong financial commitment were good criteria for getting into batch 0 for projects. There are a number of open questions that we received feedback that the material that we presented at the February 3rd workshop, that there are still things we need to work through. Some of those we've already discussed, and we have been really actively working behind the scenes to try to address that. Feedback, in particular, the link between batch 0, but also ongoing batch and the RPG process. That is something that we heard feedback. We need to add more structure to that, and we are planning to provide some more clarity on that and what that structure could look like at the workshop that we have coming up this next Thursday. So with that, I'll move to the revision request and where we're going. So we are envisioning that there will be 4 sets of revision requests to fully implement the batch process. So the first set of revision requests will be for this transitional batch 0. We are targeting to file that by March 4th, and then we have a series of workshops that we are going to be holding starting next Thursday, but also after we file, at least another 4 workshops in order to get that set of revision request to the June 1st board meeting. And then in addition to the batch 0 revision request, we are planning on a revision request specifically for the new co-located generation. and a set of revision requests for the CLR concept. And the idea is that we would like to get those to the June board meeting, but understand that there is just a lot of technical details to work through with those. And so it's possible that those don't make it to June, but we're at least going to start off with the anticipation that we're going to try for that. And then the fourth set of revision requests would be the set that would lay out the ongoing process for what we're calling batch 1+. And so that will obviously come later. Don't anticipate that would be at the June board, but that would be the revision request that would lay out the rules for going forward. One other thing I wanted to mention is that we've been working with TAC leadership and have scheduled, not only because we have this, the batch studies, but we have some other important revision requests, DRS, the voltage ride-through standard, those, a lot that we're trying to get to the June board meeting. And so the stakeholders have been very good at helping us to schedule some additional meetings for both PRS and for TAC in months of April and May, so we can achieve that June board meeting for those. So with that, I will stop and see if y'all have any questions.
Thank you, Jeff. Commissioners, questions?
Thank you.
So I think, Jeff, like we've talked about before, I think a key to being successful here is on slide number 2, key open questions, listening to stakeholders about the questions, one that a couple of you and I have talked about specifically around transparency into this process and the idea of having some type of portal that people could see projects to know where they are. And then also what we're going to do with loads that, for instance, we're in, say, the 2024 RTP and, really kind of underpinned our move like in the Permian for 765, how all that's going to work into this, I think is going to be key to making sure we come out to a good conclusion here. So, as I appreciate all the workshops that you are scheduling, I think ERCOT heard loud and clear from the commission that this needs to be a public process with a lot of input. And I definitely appreciate that. I think as you have more and more workshops, the need to kind of narrow the focus of those will be evident, because this is a lot to take on. So I think definitely something at least to consider to kind of narrow some of those future some of the future workshops, so you can focus and the market participants know better kind of where they need to focus their attention as well.
Yeah, and we see that the same. So I think what you'll see is that the workshop that we have on the 26th next Thursday, it's going to cover a lot of ground, but then the subsequent workshops will be narrowing in on specific topics and diving deeper into those topics. So we agree.
Appreciate it. All right. Thank you for the update. All right, item number 26 is project number 58479, rulemaking for net metering arrangements involving a large load co-located with an existing generation resource under PURA section 39.169. Good afternoon, Jessie.
Good afternoon. Jessie Horn for Commission staff. Before you is Commission staff's recommended adoption order for new section 25.205 relating to net metering arrangements involving a large load customer co-located with an existing generation resource. If adopted, the new rule would apply to a net metering arrangement involving a large load customer and an existing generation resource. It would also establish the criteria for ERCOT's study of a net metering arrangement, set forth the procedural steps for ERCOT to complete its study of a proposed net metering arrangement within 120 days of receipt of the information that ERCOT deems necessary regarding the net metering arrangement. The rule would also set forth the procedural steps for the Commission to approve with or without conditions or deny a proposed net metering arrangement within 60 days after ERCOT files its study results and recommendations with the Commission. And finally, the rule would identify a non-exhaustive list of conditions that the Commission may impose on a net metering arrangement. The most significant changes since the PFP stage include moving up the timeline for direct testimony to require that the applicants support their application with evidence. when they open the docket instead of waiting until ERCOT's study results are filed. The intent behind this was to clarify that the applicants carry the burden of proof for approval of the net metering arrangement. The burden does not lie with ERCOT to prove that the application should be approved. Rather, ERCOT is a third-party expert providing recommendations to the commission, and those recommendations are informed by the information that the applicants provide to ERCOT. And so it's important that the applicants provide evidence on the underlying information that's being submitted to ERCOT for use in its study. The second significant change is to account for the batch study process and to avoid duplicative work. The new rule would allow ERCOT to use a completed interconnection study for the transmission security analysis. This is primarily a clarification and clarifies that an interconnection study must meet the requirements that are set forth in the ERCOT protocols that are in effect at the time the application for approval of the net metering arrangement is filed with the commission. And one additional point of clarification that ties back with the other significant change we made is that the expectation would be that you are filing your application at a time when your application is complete. So you have the completed large load interconnection study if filing while Pigger 115 is still in place, or the completed batch study if filing when the batch study process is in place. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jessie. Commissioners, I talked to staff. I think there's still a couple issues I want to go through, so it's not my intention to vote this out today, bring it back to the March 12th open meeting, if that's okay. All right, questions for Jessie?
I just had two quick ones, Jessie, if you could walk us through a little bit. I noticed that there has now been a definition added, let me make sure I'm referencing the right one, subsection B7 for interconnecting distribution service provider. I noticed there were several comments about it and ensuring that we're trying to really capture the entities that we need to in this. Can you walk us through what y'all's thoughts were by adding it and why you included what you included?
Yes, Commissioner. So we had posted a question for comment when we posted the proposal for publication asking about how to interpret the two provisions within PURA 39.169 that talk about which parties or which entities may object to a net metering arrangement and which entities are parties to the proceeding. And the question that we were asking was related back to how those entities are described. There's slightly different language, and to the extent that we needed to reconcile those two provisions. And so I think in the proposal for publication, we had tried to just capture that with interconnecting utility. In response to the questions that were posed, we got a lot of feedback about the many different configurations and situations that you may have within the ERCOT region, because we have non-opt-in entities and then we have our competitive choice areas. And there's certain jurisdictional differences between the two, but they would all still be expected to be parties to a proceeding. And so the expectation was that we're trying to provide clarity and transparency about what our expectations are in the statute. And so as an initial matter for the interconnecting distribution service provider, the DSP, what we're trying to capture is that it would be the entity that is the wires distribution side, and that if it's located within an electric co-op or municipally owned utilities service territory, we would also be capturing those entities that provide the retail side. And so we define interconnecting DSP to be the electric utility, municipally owned utility, or electric co-op that provides retail electric service at the location that the customer is seeking to interconnect. And so to the extent, though, that there is any concern that we are not capturing all of those entities, staff would be happy to go back and see if we can clarify some of that language.
Okay, that's very helpful. The second one I had was if you could walk us through the difference that are really what staff is trying to capture in subsection K4 and K5, where you talk about make capacity available and then the reduction of load. Can you give us a little peek behind the curtain there as well?
Yes. So what we're This goes back to another question that we posed for comment in the proposal for publication. And what we're trying to do is explain what the expectation is for making capacity available. First and foremost, the expectation would be that the load would stop consuming from the existing generation resource to make that resource's capacity available. Because the statute imposes a mandatory condition under certain circumstances for the commission to impose on the net metering arrangement, we're also trying to differentiate between the two, right? So there's the provision in PURA 39169 that talks about if a resource was making dispatchable capacity available before the net metering arrangement, that resource would have to make dispatchable capacity available after the net metering arrangement under certain conditions. And so there's a specific subsection within K that addresses that piece, what that means. We've defined dispatchable capacity to be the capacity that's primarily controlled by human source. And so this would apply specifically to the dispatchable resources in terms of making capacity available. The load reduction, I think that there's been some feedback already that it's not clear enough that those loads could use backup generation. That is the intention, but what we're trying to clarify is that the impact to the ERCOT system should be net positive. And so if the commission would like, we would be happy to go back and see about maybe fine tuning some of that language and providing that clarity.
That's very helpful. And last comment, just thank you. Thank you and your team for all the work. It's a lot of fast moving pieces.
Thank you. I know we've had some discussions on this, just kind of going back and forth, and I believe the intention of H2 is to ensure that ERCOT gets the information and that we get the information to review these arrangements without being tied to one study or another. But for everyone, just to be clear, can you walk through a little bit of H2 and how the timelines for current and futuristic would go? Yes. So, and to the extent there's any desire for further clarification within this language, we're happy to take that feedback as well and come back to the next open meeting. But what we're trying to capture is that within the existing process, ERCOT already requires a large load interconnection study. That's something that is provided to ERCOT. It's performed by the TSP, the transmission service providers. And then provided to ERCOT before they can do their net metering arrangement study. This helps inform the transmission security piece. This is a transmission security analysis that helps inform that aspect of the net metering study. And so under the existing processes, you would have to have that large load interconnection study at the time that you're applying for approval of a net metering arrangement. What we're trying to clarify within the rule is that what is important for this transitional period in identifying what the expectations is for your particular project is that you have a completed large load interconnection study on the date that you file your application and that the Figure 115 requirements are in effect on that date that you filed the application with the completed study. That's the process today. Recognizing we're moving towards a batch study process, the expectation is that when the batch study process goes into effect, going forward, loads will need a batch study as part of the transmission security piece to inform ERCOT's overall review and analysis for a net metering arrangement. So those are the primary considerations is what's in effect at the time the application is filed and that you have a completed study based on what is in effect at that time. That's helpful. And then my last item is on A2. And I know that this is conditions imposed on a net metering arrangement may include, and I know may language can sometimes be read in a different way because it's may, and then we list items out, but then we use an and after D. Is it in our intention of how should that be read? Should we change and to an or because it is a list? What is y'all's feeling on that? So staff's thoughts in regards to this particular piece and why we used and what we're trying to describe, and we're happy to take feedback on this as well and come back with clearer language. But what we're trying to describe is that the conditions imposed could be any one of the conditions listed. It could also be a combination of the conditions that are listed, including all the way up to all of them. So that's what we're trying to capture. Yeah, definitely feedback on that. If being read, obviously we're here in the room, but from outside in a few years, if that will be read as a list and or mandatory from an and with the may language, that would be helpful because usually that is, I read it to want to use an or from statutory interpretation, but would like feedback on that. So, understood. Thank you for your work. This is great.
Jessie, again, thank you. I think it may be helpful, and I don't want to belabor the point, but to make a finer point on kind of the transition to the batch, it may be helpful if ERCOT comes up for this. Nathan, if you want to come up real quick.
Morning, Chairman, Commissioners. Nathan Bigbee with ERCOT.
Thanks for being here this morning. So I just want to make sure I get the order of operations right. So today, under the current process, when there is a submission of an application, it includes a transmission security analysis by the transmission distribution utility, right?
Right.
And so we will continue that process until such a time that a new MPRR goes into effect that deals with batching. Once that happens, the batch study process will now be that transmission security analysis. So the TDSP will no longer be submitting that. Is that correct?
That is our expectation, correct.
Okay. And so one of the concerns I think I've heard about that is around timeline and timing if we're only going to do 2 batches. But as I think about it, perhaps the benefit is if we know we're going to do batches every 6 months, that gives certainty to the companies about when they will actually get that analysis completed and their application will be finalized. Is that what you're thinking?
That's right. Compared to a large load interconnection study process that we have today, there is not certainty, not necessarily visibility on the timing of when those studies will be done. And so for those net metering applicants, there's that uncertainty and when they can get that application on file with the commission. The batch study approach should solve that problem from our perspective.
Okay, so I think, again, as I think about it, we're going to have to be really clear probably in the MPRR about what that date of transition is so that so that entities understand kind of which rules they're under. I'm sure we're going to get a lot of feedback on this issue between now and the 12th. So, I think, to be continued. I will say I think it makes sense the way you're thinking about it, but I definitely want to continue to think about it as we move towards the 12th. Barksdale.
Thanks, Chairman. I would also like to emphasize the point that my understanding is that batch, and Jessie made this point, but the batch will replace the TSP's current transmission security analysis. So the intention behind the rule is to ensure that there is no duplication of effort, either by the TSP or by ERCOT, which will avoid unnecessary work, but also, more importantly, will avoid elongating unnecessarily the process for any load and existing generation resource to get through to the final decision point that you all will have to make under the net metering proposal.
Thank you for that. Commissioners, anything else? All right, yeah, so we'll bring this back to the next open meeting on March 12th with the intention of voting it out there. Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you.
Next up is item 27. That is project number 58481, rulemaking to implement large load interconnection standards under PURA section 37.0561.
So Jessie Horn for Commission staff. Before you is Commission staff's recommended proposal for publication. This is for new section 25.194 relating to large load interconnection standards. The rule would require a large load customer before they can be included in an ERCOT interconnection study to execute an intermediate agreement that requires the large load customer to provide certain disclosures and post-financial security in the amount of $100,000 per megawatt. The rule also requires that a large load customer not later than 30 days after ERCOT completes the interconnection study to execute an interconnection agreement that requires the large load customer to update its disclosures, pay a non-refundable interconnection fee in the amount of $100,000 per megawatt, post financial security for significant equipment or services, pay contribution in aid of construction for direct interconnection costs, and post financial security for system upgrades. The rule also sets forth the consequences of withdrawing all or a portion of the requested peak demand or contracted peak demand. Fourth, the rule would set forth the consequences of failing to satisfy a milestone in the large load customer's schedule for phased energization. And finally, the rule would set forth the terms for refund of financial security for a large load customer that energizes. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jessie. Commissioners, questions?
No, thank you.
So I think there's still some open questions on this one for me. So I think, again, I would propose that we delay action on this, particularly some questions around the amount of the deposit per megawatt and some of the other things maybe around site control and other issues that I think I still need to kind of get my mind around a little more. Jessie, I appreciate all the time you and Barksdale have spent, I'm sure with all of us, but definitely with me on this. This is a big one. We got to get this right. We're trying to solve an interesting equation here to, make sure that these projects are real, but not set thresholds so high that real projects don't come to Texas. And so I think it'll be helpful to think about this some more. We've already gotten a lot of briefing on this. A lot of companies have come in and talked about their issues, but I definitely think some more time to work through with staff. Some of the ideas and thoughts that market participants have brought to us would be helpful. Kathleen, did you have any questions? No?
Good with that. Good approach.
Okay. Again, thank you. I've said this before, we hated to see Lori leave, but I honestly have no idea where we would be on these Senate Bill 6 rules if you were not in our rules division. So thank you for all the work on this.
Thank you.
Next is item number 35. That is project number 58401, calendar year 2025, updates to Chapter 22 procedural rules. And I filed a memo, and I think we've gotten our first view of the memo style for Commissioner Johnson. So would you like to lay out your memo?
Sure. Really, the only addition I would like to make to the rules, and I want to first, before I even get into it, say, Mac, thank you so much. I know Chapter 22 rules have probably not been the easiest to go through and clean up and amend. So I appreciate all the efforts you guys have done and undertaken with these things. And I appreciate stakeholders' efforts as well. It's always really helpful when you have additional feedback. But the really only big change I would like to make, as discussed in the memo, is to, rather than deleting the 30-day provision with regard to certified questions, is making it 30 to 60 to account just for time. I know that OPDM has a lot on their plate, but I also want to ensure that we have certainty to interested parties, whether that be ALJs, people watching from afar, or the parties to the case that have submitted the question.
Appreciate that change. Commissioners, thoughts, questions?
Yeah, good reversion accomplishes, I think, the objective by extending the timeline from 30 to 60.
Okay, thank you.
And then I filed a memo that basically would amend this to maintain the ability for parties to appeal discovery rulings to the commission. I think it's important that we preserve that. I talked to Mac about it, and they're in agreement. So happy to answer any questions on that.
No, I'm glad you flagged it, and I'm glad that I didn't have to write a memo on it, so thank you.
All right, so with that, I will entertain a motion to approve the proposal for adoption as modified by the two memos and delegate authority to staff to make conforming changes to the preamble.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. All right, and then last is item number 37. That is an update. And I believe we had one update. Rich, were you going to provide an update today? Perfect.
Chairman, Commissioners, Rich Parsons, Commission staff. I'll make this brief, but I wanted to give you all an update on an important redesign of our website targeting consumers. We have gone through the website, taken all the consumer resources that we have that were far-flung on the site, and we've consolidated it and centralized it into what we're calling the Consumer Help Hub. Our goal is to make the information for consumers easier to find, easier to navigate, and easier to understand. It's been a lot of work. There's a lot of stuff on the website that we needed to go out and find hidden away here and there. We created a landing page for it, and we worked very closely with the Office of Public Engagement, with CPD, the Consumer Protection Division, and with the Division of Utility Outreach, the water team, to get the most frequently asked questions that they receive from consumers, put those on the website, and then answer them in very plain language. Very consumer-focused resource here, and we're already seeing some strong results. We went live with this a soft rollout on Tuesday. We've already seen more than 2,600 visits to these resources. And our goal is always to serve the consumers, consumer-focused. We do a lot of great things at the agency for consumers to help them with a lot of their needs relating to water, electric, and telecom. And we want to make it as easy as possible for them. So I want to say thank you to the team at OPE, the team at CPD, the team at Duo, and to the folks on our communications team, especially Ellie Breed and Drake Kirk. They did most of the heavy lifting on this. And the great thing about this is, of course, it's on the website, so it's going to be a living resource. We can update it, we can tweak it anytime anybody has something. And as issues come up before the commission and people have questions on bill, technology, language that we're using to help them understand what we do and how we can help them. So I just wanted to let y'all know that was out there, and let the folks of Texas know we're working to make it easier on them to do business with us.
Appreciate the update, and I would add a thanks to you since you arrived at the commission. Making information and having more engagement with customers is something that's, kind of been your North Star. And so I think you deserve a lot of credit for our improved ability to communicate with citizens in Texas. The website is kind of the gateway through which most citizens get information from us, and making that easily available is really important. So appreciate all the effort.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rich.
All right, thanks.
All right, commissioners, anything else? Sheila, I think we're good. All right, with there being no further business before us, this meeting of the Public Utility Commission of Texas is hereby adjourned.